Hi, I'm Craig West, founder of Capitaliz. In our last video, we talked about the Business Insights Report and how it's the primary tool to work with our business owner clients to help them understand their business, where it's at, what it looks like, and what they can do going forward. Right at the end of that video, we talked about value potential. And in the Smith Engineering case study that we use, we talked about the value today being 5.3 million, but the value potential being 9 million. In other words, what could I do to increase the value of my business? Now, typically when I deliver an insights report to a client, at that point they ask two questions. Firstly, how confident am I of the $9 million? And of course, we are quite confident. We've done 700 of these over the years, and we're getting more and more data all the time. So the calculations become more and more accurate as the algorithm uses that data set. But the second thing I say to clients is really, whilst I'm very confident about the 9 million, let's assume I'm half wrong. Let's assume it's actually only 7.5 million. I'm still giving you an increase in value of $2.5 million. So your business value goes from 5.3 to 7.5, even if I've got the calculation slightly wrong. You're picking up a substantial value potential or value increase over that period of time. The second question clients ask then is, okay, how? What do I need to do to actually deliver that value? And that's where the 24-month program, 21 steps over 5 stages of value, becomes quite important. And the idea here is that there's literally a linear program from step 1. Step 3 is actually the delivery of the Business Insights Report. So we've already ticked off the first 3 steps. And then there's a process. There's another 17 steps to walk through and make sure we get everything we need to maximize business value and achieve a successful exit. Now, the good thing is the Capitaliz software produces for you an implementation roadmap. It will map out every single one of the steps from 1 to 21, typically over a 2-year period, highlighting all the things that the report's found, all the gaps, all the issues, all the things that weren't done or weren't in place in your business that are detracting from value or adding to risk. Obviously, the higher the risk, the lower the valuation. So we've got to get rid of all those risks. And so we've then got a 5-stage process, and that's the 5 stages of value that we designed. The first stage is really identifying value, and we've done that because that's the Business Insights Report. We now know what we've got, what we're dealing with, what the issues are, and what the value is and the value potential. Stage 2 then is to protect the value that we've already got. So that starts to look at the risks, starts to look at some of the insurance and legal agreements that we need to protect the business, the assets around it, and ourselves as an owner. Literally asking, what happens if we get hit by a bus? Where does the business end up? Have we got documents that manage all of that? Is there insurances in place? Have we got everything else we need to make sure that the business is protected, our family's protected, and the value of that asset, which we've now determined is $5 million, is also protected? And so there's 3 steps in that second stage around protecting value. Stage 3 then is the more exciting part, which is maximizing value or value acceleration, to use the EPI terminology. How do we accelerate value in that business? And of course, that's working on all of those key things we've identified. Financial improvement, we look at the business model, we look at a strategic business plan, we look at a strategic financial model. So what does that mean? It's not about budgeting like we normally do, taking last year's performance, adding 5% and seeing what it ends up. It's actually designing a strategic financial model to deliver your outcome. So if your family's outcome is to have a business that generates $1 million worth of profit, pays tax on that $1 million, and then pays you a dividend of, let's say, $500,000, because it's got to retain some of the profit for ongoing growth, then the financial model and the business plan needs to match that. We actually build backwards from that $500,000 dividend. If you're going to pay a $500,000 dividend, you've got to make $1 million, you're going to pay tax on that $1 million, you're going to reinvest some capital, and then you'll have money left over for the dividend. But to achieve that figure, what does the business need to look like? How many widgets do we need to make? What price do we need to sell them at? How many people do we need to make those widgets? And what's our model look like in terms of sales and marketing and logistics and delivery of those widgets to our marketplace? That's a strategic business plan. And everything else needs to match that plan to make sure we get that outcome, in this case, the $500,000 a year dividend. The second thing we then have to think about is, what else can we do to maximize value? So we've got a strategic model, we've got our financial model. We then start to look at the ways that we can actually maximize value in the business. So things like systems, policies and procedures to make our business more efficient, operate more efficiently, save time, effort and money, and make sure that the business is not locked in or waiting for the founder or key person to make a decision. That our staff are empowered, they know what they can and can't do, they know what decisions they can and can't make, and we can get on with running the business really efficiently. We also look at things like corporate governance. What governance structures have we got in place? What decision matrix is there? Do we have a board of directors or an advisory board working with us? If we do, how's that structured? Have we got an independent person on that board? What reporting do we get? Do we get a monthly reporting pack that tells us how the business is performing or not? What do we do in terms of outcomes from those board meetings? What directions are given to the business managers or CEO? How do we then manage that process going forward? And then we start to look at employees and employees' incentives. Step 13 and 14 talks about an ownership mindset and an employee incentive plan. Might be a profit share plan or a bonus scheme. In some cases, it's an employee share plan. And then in step 15, we actually look at management succession. Who's going to take over the business when you exit? Who can run the business for you or with you as you look to transition out and exit towards retirement? Assuming we get all that done, and that typically takes 12 to 18 months, we then get to stage 4. And stage 4 is actually when we extract the value. What's our liquidity event? How do we unlock the value that's in the business? Now that could be a stack of things. It could be an M&A transaction. We might sell the business to a private equity firm or a strategic buyer. In some cases for larger clients, it might be an IPO or listing on a public exchange. But sometimes it's a sale, trade sale. It might be an employee share plan based transaction. It might even be the case that you're just preparing the business to pass on to your family, your children. And there's lots of things that need to be done in that space if that's the case. Lots of documentation, taxation advice, due diligence, and then obviously the transaction. Now I also want to point out here, the transaction that we're talking about here sits well down the line at step 17. There's a lot of things that have happened before that. So we've done all the preparation and that's critical. Actually making that transaction effective is actually about all the steps before it. That makes the transaction much easier. If you just come in and start with the M&A transaction, you're leaving a lot of value on the table. And then lastly, once we've extracted value, we've got 3 more steps around how do we then actually manage that value going forward. If we've retired, where does those funds get invested? How are they managed? How are they looked after? How are they protected? What's our estate planning approach? What does that look like? And maybe even thinking about things like philanthropic donations or charitable foundations, all those sorts of things that business owners typically look at or want to do. Now, as we go through that process, typically over an 18-month to 24-month period, there's 21 steps in there, and some of them are quite detailed and require a lot of work to be done. So they might take more than 1 month. Typically, it's a 2-year engagement with most of our clients, and typically most of our clients in Succession Plus in Australia anyway, are paying us $5,000 a month to go through that process. Now, there's 2 reasons why that works. One is that's matched directly back to the value potential. So our clients are going to pay us $5,000 a month. That's $60,000 a year, typically $120,000 over the life of this engagement. That's a lot of money to pay an advisor, but it's not a lot of money to deliver that value potential. If you directly relate $120,000 in costs to a return of $3 or $4 million in value increase, the ROI is actually really, really positive. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the software helps you with that. We've got a feature called dynamic revaluation. And what that does on the client dashboard, it shows every time one of these projects or steps is completed, and every time the financial performance of the business is updated, the valuation updates automatically on the screen. So our software knows, for example, if you're an architecture firm and you go and put in place a corporate governance structure with a board of directors or an advisory board and an independent director, then that has an impact on valuation that our algorithm automatically calculates, and your valuation on the home screen dashboard will automatically tick up. It'll automatically change and show you what that improvement is equivalent to. Is it $100,000 or $500,000? Importantly, that then ties back the value and the ROI for the business owner when they're working with you as their advisor to maximise the value of the business and achieve a successful exit. As we go through delivering the 21-step process, each step has a series of projects and a series of tools and templates and checklists that are attached to that particular step. Some of them have 2 or 3, a couple of them have 10, 12 or even 15 because they're much more detailed. The key deliverable here is that we typically, in Succession Plus, we meet with our clients for half a day a month typically, and we go through, this week we're on step 15 and we're going to do this and we're going to talk about that, and here's the agenda items. I typically email out to clients the chapter of the book that relates to step 15 a week before, so they get a bit of a view of what that step's all about and what do I need to think about when I meet with my advisor next week. And that's probably a good tip for advisors to use, emailing out the chapter or the relevant material just to have a bit of a think about what needs to be done. The most important part, however, is following the meeting. Our model is not based on the advisor doing all the work. Our model is based on the advisor using the software to deliver the particular learnings and steps that are required to tick off step 15, but there's work to be done. And what we always recommend is that you use the software to create the meeting notes, the tasks and action items. The software will allow you to record the minutes, if you like, of the meeting. What are all the things we discussed and what are the key items that we've agreed to do? Most importantly then, the action items. Who is going to do what, by when? That's captured in the software. And the software will actually remind you and prompt you. If that's something that you need, for example, you're the advisor and you need the client's accountant to do something, then it'll automatically prompt that person to do that. It'll follow up. It'll let you know that task is now outstanding. So you can actually create the meeting minutes, the action items, and the tasks that go with it to make sure people are held accountable, and more importantly, to make sure your client is working through the 21 steps and progressing down the pathway. What we don't want is a client to stall in the middle of the process because there's a whole stack of outstanding action items that they've either forgotten about, not done, too busy, the accountant hasn't got around to it, or whatever it might be. So using the roadmap, the implementation plan, the tools, templates, checklists, there's about 150 of those altogether, and then the meeting notes and action items to help you keep things on track, make sure people are accountable, and help you get through the process over a period of time.